Gigi asked if I could share a few words today, just to kind of put the broader story on the table. How are we changing the way Washington works? This was a big priority of the president on the campaign, and it's been a priority of his for our technology community from day one. And so what I thought I might do is spend maybe 20 minutes or so to walk you through a journey of how we are encapsulating the president's underlying philosophy of governance through harnessing the power of technology, data, and innovation. I have no particular recommendations for the Copyright Office, but would welcome the opportunity to collaborate to the extent that any of these principles are relevant for your discussion that happened earlier today, and obviously what will follow. So without much further ado, Gigi did reference the fact that the president, on his first full day in office, wrote a memorandum on openness that said, in part, that my administration is committed to creating an unprecedented level of openness in government and to establish a system of transparency, public participation, and collaboration. He had directed me, in my capacity as Chief Technology Officer, before I was named, before the Senate confirmed me, to put together a set of recommendations that would guide management policy. Now, that's gone through multiple iterations. Office of Management and Budget has now codified this into rules of the road. Agencies have all implemented open government plans. I was just asking Gigi, I don't even know if the Copyright Office has done this. Every federal agency that's under the jurisdiction of the Office of Management and Budget's purview, in other words, the executive branch agencies, what we call the cabinet level agencies, all have developed a strategy to embody these principles, and you can read them on their website, anyagency/open. So if you care about healthcare, hhs.gov/open. If you care about education, ed.gov/open. And you'll hear some examples of this momentarily. But I wanted to provide for you some tangible examples as to how the open government philosophy translates into support for everyday Americans and for our economic growth writ large. So you must be wondering, what am I actually showing you? What is all this about? Well, in the health reform bill, the Affordable Care Act, one of its first homework assignments was to create, in shorthand, an Expedia for individual health insurance products. It turns out that we had three transparency challenges in the health insurance market. Number one, there was no national repository comprehensive to all health insurance products that are sold in every community in the country. Nobody in the private sector assembled such a catalog, and there was none that incorporated all the public sector options as well. So in less than 90 days, the Affordable Care Act directed HHS to publish such an inventory. That's number one. Number two, in the spirit of Expedia, can anybody tell me the pricing for a health insurance product at the individual customer level? No, it's like a big black box. So the second biggest challenge is there was no model for actually getting pricing from our ecosystem. And third, you didn't really know how to compare various insurance product offerings on key variables that we will talk about momentarily that would be useful to you in making a decision about what health insurance product you might want to buy. Now, this provision, from what I gathered, was wholeheartedly bipartisan and absolutely in the spirit of empowering you with the information you need to lead a better life. And without much fanfare, on July 1, as called for in the law, we went live. Millions of Americans have accessed healthcare.gov. You simply type in your zip code, answer a few questions, and it'll personalize for you all of the individual health insurance options that are available to you in today's environment with two very important pieces of information. Number one, we asked the insurance industry to tell us, how often do you charge a premium above and beyond the, what I would call, rack rate when you sell the insurance plan? Because for whatever reason, after you underwrote the plan, the person in question had conditions that would require you to charge them more money. We wanted that to be a transparent item. And second, we wanted to know how accessible is the product? In other words, how often do people apply for this product and get denied because they can't qualify? Maybe they have a pre-existing condition or whatever the case may be. So just imagine, in less than 90 days, all three of those gaps were addressed at very low marginal cost to the American consumer because we trafficked in data. The industry collaborated and shared all of this information. And let me just give you an example. This screenshot, you can't really read it because it's maybe not that easy. Plan A over the far left, United Healthcare, 10% of the folks that are charged the $980 in premiums are actually offered or pay a surcharge. So you have a sense for the you kind of know what you're going to get if you look for that product. Here to the far right, while the product is $1,068, 46% of the folks who apply for this product end up paying a surcharge. So you just get more transparency, more information, and it's a tool that helps it improve the lives of everyday Americans. And this is the kind of story we're running in every single agency. Now, what's the underlying philosophy that is driving a lot of this? It is embodied in the President's long-term strategy for American innovation. A strategy that the President unveiled for the first time in September of 2009 amidst our economic recovery approach to say, what can we do today to, in today's words, my colleague Austin Goolsbee has said, to plant the seed corn for the jobs and the industries of the future? And how might the role of government help to catalyze all the components of the ecosystem to get us there? Well, the President basically said there are three fundamental policy levers that we want to focus on. First, investing in the building blocks of innovation. That's traditionally R&D, STEM, or human capital, as well as infrastructure, which in today's day and age is clearly in the digital domain. Second, it's promoting market-based innovation. Part of why we're here today in the Copyright Office is the President believes IP-intensive industries are an important component of our economic growth strategy. And last but certainly not least, there are a few areas where we as a nation need and benefit from an all-hands-on-deck approach, because we need breakthroughs in healthcare IT to lower costs, improve quality. We need leapfrog improvements in our educational system, and so forth and so on. So now, a bit about this strategy in the digital context, and then how it translates into our open government philosophy writ large. First, one of the most important components of infrastructure, we believe, over the next decade and beyond, is the third chapter in the Internet engine of economic growth. And we believe that third chapter of economic growth will be borne out on wireless infrastructure or mobile strategy. So the President unveiled the National Wireless Infrastructure and Innovation Initiative, WI3, in Marquette, Michigan, a few weeks back, which has as its core the government's role in identifying 500 megahertz of spectrum over the next 10 years that can be repurposed and put to better use through voluntary incentive auctions and related tools to those entities capable of delivering that infrastructure of the 21st century. To do this, we need legislation. We're working with Congress to collaborate on the policy tools necessary so that both the private sector holders of spectrum and the public sector holders of spectrum can collaborate in a way to unleash this potential. Leveraging the proceeds that would come out of these auctions, the President called for an expansion of investments through the private sector to have 98% of the American people covered, and to build out the nation's public safety broadband network. Perhaps most relevant for the community here is to think anew about infrastructure innovation in wireless. So we put $3 billion in an innovation fund that will look at new breakthroughs in cybersecurity, reliability of the network under adverse conditions, thinking creatively about dynamic spectrum sharing and the like. So if you're curious about how your copyright works can be secured in a commercial context on internet infrastructure, and you're somewhat concerned about today's environment, given all the pieces and parts that you see, this innovation fund is a critical ingredient in ensuring the nation's best scientists and engineers are thinking about and harnessing new approaches to protect your goods in the context of mobile commerce. Now, a word on open government, which was the thesis for why Gigi asked me to say a few words for you this afternoon. In the context of open government, we see three technology policy levers that have traditionally been underutilized when it comes to affecting the role of government. Normally, in this room, you think of government output in legislation or budgeted programs. And that's sort of how we have our debates. Well, is there money in the budget for X? Did Congress appropriate money for Y? Is there, in fact, legislation that authorizes the use of X, Y, or Z? That is the output we typically traffic in. If you hear nothing else in my remarks, I'd like you to consider the following three policy levers as output of government in the 21st century under the President's spirit of openness, and that is pre-competitive R&D collaboration, open data, and voluntary industry consensus-driven standards activities. If you look at these three policy levers, and you combine them with new and creative ways to engage the American people, we believe we can deliver transformative results across a wide range of topics, be they health, energy, education, homeland security, and the like. Now, to prove that hypothesis, allow me to share a few words of examples. Pre-competitive R&D collaboration. Tomorrow, a research group at Harvard University will publish an application programming interface that would allow for a completely new market for substitutable medical applications. Now, you might look at me and say, what is this guy talking about? Today, in our nation's healthcare ecosystem, we have a completely variable IT infrastructure. Proprietary vendors in every context have set up islands of information. So if I wanted to create an innovative technology application that would help my patients stay healthier, live longer lives, ensure that they're getting the kind of preventive services that they need, in order for me to get my application to market, I'd have to find a way to jerry-rig it onto each of these individual islands and silos of IT infrastructure. So under one worldview, you'd say, just get rid of all that IT infrastructure and move to some open standard architecture. Well, what the team at Harvard did from an R&D perspective is they said, what if we could build out through open collaboration a light platform such that whatever your underlying IT system is at its core, we would report the data and the information necessary to render some kind of healthcare judgment in a consistent way so that there could be a new market for applications who only have to write to the one interface, the smart platform as they're calling it, and allow that to then scale. So literally a year after we invested the grant, about $15 million out of HHS went to the research project. 1 year to the day, they will have published this API, and we will create a whole new competitive market around how we can drive value in our healthcare system. Now, we're doing this across every federal agency, thinking about these R&D competitive platforms in the launching of challenge.gov, a tool that allows every federal agency to discuss a particularly thorny issue they'd like to have solved and to encourage the ecosystem of scientists, technologists, or laymen to come together in solutions. Over 60 challenges are available today. Thanks to the America Competes Act, every federal agency now has the authority to issue a challenge or a prize. And I have an open invitation to the Copyright Office to take advantage of this asset any day of the week. How do you translate R&D into the operating setting? There's a lot of buzz this day and age around cloud computing. I want to share with you a story in the spirit of open government about how we took a research and development endeavor and translated that into an operating asset, a signature initiative for the President. In the fall of 2007, a professor at UC Santa Barbara had an idea. He looked at the Amazon Web Services Cloud and said, I'd love to recreate the functionality of the Amazon Cloud, but to do so within the privacy and security restrictions of my university environment. And he happens to have been a part of a research collaborative that included Rice University in Texas and a half a dozen others, and said, I'd love to create a private cloud for my colleagues to share information. So he submitted an unsolicited research proposal to NSF and was successful in getting small dollars to build out this concept. It was so successful that in less than 2 years, he spun off the research into a new company called Eucalyptus Systems, basically took the source code, made it open source, and built a services company called Eucalyptus to translate this into product offerings for the market. And his first customer was our NASA research center at Ames in Silicon Valley. And you see pictured here the Nebula truck. That's literally like a tractor-trailer thing, a hauler. And in that infrastructure, they were the first to use this private cloud. It was so successful and so cost-effective that my colleague, the Chief Information Officer, designated it as the infrastructure that would support the signature initiative of the President's in terms of openness of spending data at usaspending.gov. So by May of 2010, the usaspending.gov platform migrated from whatever it was on in the government's context, the traditional IT procurement process, and moved into this open cloud architecture that was just a professor's idea less than 3 years ago. So when you think about government in the spirit of collaboration, today the joke is that we're often the last person to buy technologies because of our procurement cycles being what they are. But in the President's spirit of openness, we have found ways to collaborate so we can almost be an early adopter where appropriate and where we can manage risk. That is part and parcel of this philosophy of R&D collaboration. Second point, open data. I'd like to share with you the story of one of our Recovery Act's finest moments in education policy. Included in the Recovery Act was about a $650 million one-time programming application for something called the Invest in Innovation Fund, or I3, whose job it was to surface early ideas that could dramatically improve learning outcomes powered by technology and innovation, to validate some of those ideas that need a bit more cooking in the oven, if you will, and then to scale those ideas that work. Now here was the problem in the spirit of open government. We knew that the demand for the program, even funded at $650 million, would far outstrip our supply of one-time resources. So we asked for 3 fundamental changes in this program. Change number 1, we asked every applicant to authorize us to publish the fact that they've applied and a summary of their application. Today, all 1,700 applicants can be downloaded at data.ed.gov. And every state in the country has entrepreneurs who apply. And I call them entrepreneurs, whether they're for-profit, not-for-profit, or governmental. And every one of you could download in your neighborhood to see what's innovative that's taking place, or at least proposed to take place in education where you live. Point number 2. We wanted to create a secondary market for the best ideas, even if we couldn't afford them. It turns out, when all was said and done, our funding allowed us to spend up to 49 awardees. But through our peer-reviewed, rigorous evaluation framework, high-scoring applications, which in our parlance, those that achieved a score of 80 or above in peer review, were by far a cut above the rest of the applicant pool. North of 200 applications achieved a score of 80 or above. But again, I said we only funded 49. So again, on data.ed.gov, you can now see the identified top-scoring applicants, even if they didn't get funding. In other words, creating a secondary market through openness. Because anyone else who is in the interest of investing in these kinds of breakthroughs will see that a rigorous evaluative framework saw that these proposals were cut above the rest. And our view is, oftentimes the unfunded might be the most successful because now there's an opportunity for them to celebrate and to be publicly rewarded for having scored that level in this process. But third, and perhaps most interesting, in the spirit of collaboration under our open government plan, We engaged with dozens of philanthropies who, on their own mission, are in the business of investing in innovations in education, but that they had never come together in any kind of structured way to allow for applications to come in under a common approach. So, led by the Gates Foundation and others, a group of foundations created foundationregistry.i3.org. One-click access. If you applied to the i3 Fund program, you could upload your application in a common format and have all of the funding philanthropies take advantage of that information and make judgments. Now, let me tell you what happened in practice. By law, every one of the awardees had to find 20% of the funding through match. But we made the decision, and I say we collectively, it was obviously the Education Department, not the White House, made the decision that when we announced the awardees, it was September of 2010, we would not make the match requirement a prohibitor in awarding them a grant. In other words, what we said was, you're good enough to get the grant, you scored above everybody else, we're going to give you 30 days to come up with the matching funds. If by the end of the time you can't, unfortunately we'll have to, take you off the awardee list because you got to meet the requirements. But we're giving you a preliminary yes so that you can go off and get funding. Look at the results. In 30 days, all 49 of the grantees met their match. But more importantly, the registry members accounted for 40% of the dollar value of the match, over $55 million, by collaborating. That's a very important pillar of our operational approach. Open government is also a tool for engaging in breakthroughs in customer experience. Now, this may have more applicability here in the Copyright Office to the extent that individuals directly connect with you, providing their works, whatever the case may be. So I thought I'd share with you an example of citizen engagement tools that embody the philosophy of open government, open data. How many of you are familiar with the New York City 311 program? Just by a quick show of hands, a number of you. Basically, if there's a pothole on 61st and Amsterdam or whatever, you as an individual are empowered with your smartphone or your phone call, literally if you want to dial it in, to say, hey, there's a pothole. New York City's 311 service would then register the fact that there was a pothole, ship the project off to the public works folks, and report back when the pothole's been fixed. This is wildly popular. 70,000 calls are fielded a month in New York City. But the punchline is, it ain't cheap. Fiscal 2010 budget for the New York City 311 service exceeds $45 million. So you can imagine the sort of double-edged sword for the typical community, because I would love to have that functionality, but there's no way I could afford that kind of price tag. Could you afford that in the Copyright Office? Not so much. But the power of openness means that we focus on the verb, not the noun. The noun is I want to buy the thing that New York City purchased or built in order to help citizens report potholes. The verb is that I want a mechanism by which citizen-reported information can influence our workflow and get tracked and reported back. It's the verb that was the insight and the transformation, not the particular set of tools used in New York. Along comes Maynard, Texas. Has anyone been to Maynard, Texas? Are you kidding me? Really? Okay. God bless you. Population of 6,500. I joke because the technology lead for Maynard, Texas has to wear like 5 different hats. I jokingly said that he's also the trash collector on Thursday, and he goes to the Parks and Recreation Department on Friday, because in a town of 6,500, you don't have a lot of overhead. Okay? They said, we want the same functionality. Whether you call it in, report it over the internet, or your smartphone, voice, web, and mobile. We want to be able to allow folks to share their problems and hold us accountable for results. Well, along comes an open platform, see-click-fix. And they were successful in deploying Fort Maynard, Texas at a whopping $38 a month. And today, you can see that there's a notice in this, when I come in the slide, the grass needs to be cut or mowed in this alleyway, beware of snakes. That's the notice, and you can see the graphic, it kind of shows you the green light, red light, on how many of the tickets have been issued and what kind of results have been delivered. In our spirit of open government, we can adopt principles of frugality to create the kind of accountability we want out of our government, because our tools are so nimble today because of the internet that we can accomplish these things in ways that historically would have required a 10-year, multi-$100-million convoluted project of reform. Last category of ideas before I exceeded my tenure on the stage. It is extremely important that we also look to standardize our work. One of the most frustrating challenges in our nation's economy is when we lack the kind of interoperability communication standards. Just to give you an example, prior to the story I'm about to share with you, a doctor cannot email his patient's or her patient's medical record to another doctor safely and securely over the public internet. You just couldn't do it because we hadn't built out the standards for safe, secure email. Now, if you were in an integrated healthcare system like Kaiser, and you wanted to email another doctor in Kaiser, you could do it all day and night. But if you wanted to leave Island A to communicate with Island B, not so much. Under the President's open government philosophy, we didn't have a lot of money. We said, you, the private sector, we're going to lock you up in a room, proverbially, for 90 days, and we want you to achieve consensus on the technical specifications for safe, secure email. Why, Gigi? They didn't need to invent nuclear physics. They just needed to take existing standards and agree to a common approach. And 80 companies participated. Google, Microsoft, and names you never heard of. And that was the point. The government set up a wiki and hired a project manager to nudge. And nudge we did. And at the end of the 90 days, they came up with a technical specification for safe, secure email. And they were successful in doing it all the way through reference implementation. And 9 months to the day, we launched the initiative on January 12th. The first commercial transaction took place between a public hospital in Minnesota, Hennepin County, and the state health department, because it turns out you have to email immunization records for public health purposes. Let me show you the math. We cut interface costs 95%. There are over 50 companies that announced in March that they would commercialize this technical specification. You know what the whopping fees that are going to be charged here for this country? $15 a month for unlimited safe, secure email is the opening bid. And mark my words, in the coming months, that number will be dramatically lower. Collaborative, voluntary standards activities. Did we have to pass a new law? No. Do we need a lot of money in the budget? No. Leadership and open government philosophies. It's about new and creative ways of harnessing standards for safe, secure extending of enterprise applications. Part of my responsibilities was to chair the President's efforts on standards for the new state-based health insurance exchanges that will be born out of the healthcare law. Every state's going to be building out an insurance program so that individuals in their state can engage in purchasing health insurance in new and creative ways. The Expedia.com I mentioned earlier. Well, when we were thinking about technical standards, we thought, look at what Netflix did. Netflix didn't originally build out their iPhone app. They opened up the developer ecosystem and invited other firms to come in and offer queue management services. I'm a Netflix customer. I never really thought I was going to change my queue on the go. It wasn't just, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. But there were like 20 firms that were competing for my business. Because of a technical standard called OAuth, it allowed for the secure, authenticated role for me to change my queue through one of these third-party applications. So the challenge we posed in our standards discussion was this. Is everybody who's going to engage in enrolling in new health insurance programs going to do so on a government-only site? Or will there be a whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs in the social services sector I remember Lynchburg, Virginia. It's a cute little community where there's a lot of collaboration in healthcare. Might there be an entrepreneurial group that says, we would love to help sign people up? What's the OAuth analogy to extend a government database so that there can be a competitive market, if you will, for third-party application service providers? Fascinating conversation. healthit.hhs.gov, by the way, can read our 25-page report on this topic. It's about engaging entrepreneurs as problem solvers. Too often, the federal government believes, or I was at the State Leadership Forum a couple hours ago, in government, we often feel that we have to build out the full solution. Let me quote, build a website that does everything. Remember that statement I made at the beginning of my remarks at healthcare.gov? From our point of view, we would be ecstatic if 95% of all the transactions ever to use the healthcare.gov information were not resident on healthcare.gov. Because we're going to build out APIs and extensions so that whether it could be I'm gigisfriend.com and I want to help you figure out insurance in the neighborhood, well, so be it. If every one of Gigi's friends wants to go through her platform and in so doing can connect back to the database because we're liberating information, well, amen. So the premise here is whether it be improving response times on buses with Metro's recent API, or the 311 collaborative that San Francisco and the other cities have launched, or the Smart Grid program where Google and others are opening up information. Hallelujah! It is actually part of our DNA in openness to say that if we have the technical standards, if we can collaborate on pre-competitive opportunities, if we have data transparency, then there should be a competitive market of innovative channels for achieving whatever the policy objective there is. Whether it be uploading your private works or whatever the workflow is here in the Copyright Office, it's beyond my pay grade, but there are opportunities, which is my final slide. To get to the finish line in today's fiscally prudent times, it's no longer a debate of whether I'm, quote, funded for a project or not. It's how smartly, under the principles of openness, we can achieve the objective. And from the President's point of view, we are a bottoms-up government. The American people have a heck of a lot of knowledge that can be deployed on any one of the challenges that we face. Our goal in the public sector is to harness that talent, reach out in new and creative ways. This past week, the Air Force joined NASA in launching an innovation pavilion on a platform called Innocentive. And I want to just take a second on the story and then I'll end. NASA had a problem, still has a problem. If there's a solar flare, it could have a very detrimental effect on a space mission. So the ability to predict the next solar event is a big deal. And I can assure you they must have paid lots of money to lots of contractors to figure this out. But in the spirit of dispersed knowledge, under the belief that there are folks out there that may not be thinking about us every day or think about the next procurement cycle or what have you, if we could find a way to reach them, we can get the job done. For like a whopping $30,000, a semi-retired radio frequency engineer living in rural New Hampshire found out about this solar challenge and submitted an approach and an algorithm that far and away exceeded any other approach NASA had ever considered. Now, this person was never a government contractor, did not subscribe to fedbizops.whatever. This person had, in Clay Shirky's words, cognitive surplus, and put that to use in advance of our public priorities. What is the Air Force asking for? I love this. One of their challenges they announced, the Vehicle Stopper Challenge. Ideas to stop uncooperative vehicles without harm. I can't wait to find out who's going to solve this problem. This is our philosophy. This is why we think we're changing the way Washington works, piece by piece, step by step. And I hope, for the copyright's perspective, this was useful for your time. Thank you. I went into overtime, so maybe if there's a question or two, or I'll get Gigi back on track.
Any questions for Aneesh? I have a question.
You may. Oh, of course. Bring it on.
I actually have an idea for who could do that, uncooperative vehicles.
Oh, good.
Maybe Denzel Washington or Jake Gyllenhaal or something like that could do that. I guess my question is, I mean, you talked about a lot of really, really cool stuff that's going on in open government. How do you see it relating to the Copyright Office? So the Copyright Office, among other things, they run a registration system.
Correct.
And it's one, you missed the first panel, but basically, there was discussion of how it could be more accessible to more people. So that OAuth thing was very, very interesting because it seems to me to be a model for what the Copyright Office could do. They've got the database, but the problem is it's only accessible if you go there.
Yes. So, in a sense, I don't like to take prescriptive solutions, so I would never tell an agency what to do. It's sort of antithesis to the DNA of what the president asks of us. So it's about celebrating alternative models. So the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office commissioned a no-revenue contract. They did an RFP. We have no money, but we'd love to liberate our patent data. And you won't believe this, lots of firms, Gigi, said creatively, here's how we would work with you to do that. And Google had been the partner that won that particular effort. And like from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. or something every day, I think some version of that, they were able to crawl in and liberate all of these terabytes of data that if they were to fund under a manual hours labor basis would have been a ridiculously expensive project. So they literally put out an open, we got no money. Anybody who wants this quote contract, no money, but we'd love to have you come forward. And as a result, in less than 6 months' time, nearly everything that's legally available for publication, and I don't know if PTO came up and chatted today, but like Kapos is the man. He found a way to liberate all this data. And there are models like this. So I guess the implication is identify the problem you're trying to solve, and ask yourself, in the spirit of dispersed knowledge and open data and standards, what play would you run to help achieve that mission objective? And if I had one takeaway from the meeting today, the traditional play of I need money for an IT project, or I need to change the law that would allow me to do X, those are hard to run plays in today's environment. And I've given us several other options that I think should be on the list of things to consider, because they could get us, maybe not all the way to the finish line, but a heck of a long way. And I think that's the spirit with what we were trying to accomplish. I got to run. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.